Many often ask me why I avoid the Obvodny Canal area, and especially the Volkovka River. Why do I never drink tap water, even after boiling? And why am I so afraid of the dilapidated, red brick factory buildings that abound in those places? Several years have passed since all of this happened, and I, not without the influence of certain circumstances, found the strength to tell the whole truth as it is. But first things first, perhaps you will consider me crazy. You will think that I have completely lost my mind. You will be partly right. My mental health has indeed seriously deteriorated. But, unfortunately, this was not the cause, but the consequence of everything that I am now firmly committed to tell. It all started on that ill-fated day when I went to a car service station located on the Volkovka embankment. This isn't the first time I've been to that area, but this time I was forced into the depths of these industrial slums. Even though the day was very sunny, it seemed like the light barely reached these dirty little streets. The surrounding landscape produced an infernal impression. The ancient tombstones of the Volkovka cemetery alternated with half-abandoned, crumbling buildings of some workshops and structures built on the site of ancient graves, which were simply razed to the ground for the sake of industrial development. Now, all these red brick buildings have long been abandoned, and only in rare places, individual nooks and crannies, parts of something once great, were converted into warehouses, car depots, car service centers, and cemeteries of long abandoned, rotting trucks. The service I was looking for was located in one of these places. The panorama was oppressive, and further aggravated my already melancholy and dreamy mood. Having sent the car in for repairs, I had at least 2 hours of free time at my disposal while waiting for the work to be completed. I didn't want to sit in the waiting room, and the surrounding landscape, coupled with my mood and love for gloomy abandoned places, was very conducive to walking. As strange as it may sound, I am really attracted to such things. Many would call this disgusting, but I find my unique mystical beauty in it, and I began to cut circles around the surrounding area. By the time I approached the bridge, it was gradually starting to get dark. The dim pink, violet light of the sunset, falling at an angle, shone through the branches and crosses of the tombstones, creating a frankly frightening atmosphere. Deciding to rest a little, I stopped near the railing of the bridge and began to look down at the flow of a dirty, already half-dried river. Melancholy thoughts, slowly, leisurely, flowed through my head. It was as if I had paused my fast and frantic life and was now thinking about everything that was, is, and should be in the future, contemplating. In the muddy, opaque water, some kind of gray-brown mud swirled, dissolving and mixing, completely different from what is usually seen in the water of normal rivers. My thoughts flew into the distance, and now I was imagining that this strange, swirling mud was nothing more than particles of decomposed corpses from the cemetery through which the river flowed. It happens when you look at something for a long time, like fire or clouds. Their intertwining begins to form into some kind of drawings, symbols, and images. Apparently, this happened now. Only the object of observation in my case was the mud seething in the river flow. At some point, it suddenly seemed to me that it had formed into the shape of a human face, and this face floated with the flow, looking at me with its cloudy white eyes without pupils. I jumped up, as if scalded, but as soon as I got scared, the obsession dissipated. One more look, and there was no longer any face, just strangely mixing streams of some small particles in the water. It began to seem to me that this whirlpool was literally drawing my thoughts into itself, having some kind of hypnotic effect, which it probably has for a tired person. Human candle flame. It was as if it was absorbing and sucking me in. I felt uneasy, and I decided that I had already thought about everything enough, having managed to awaken my very irrepressible imagination. It's time to return back to Earth. Looking at the phone clock, I made sure that the bridge took me a fair amount of time. The whole hour during which I looked at the water passed like 1 minute. The car repair was just about to be completed, and I walked towards the auto repair shop. Along the way, I thought a lot more about the face I saw there in the water. It was very reminiscent of the face of a half-decomposed corpse, and for some time, I even speculated that the river passing through the cemetery could have washed away one of the coastal graves. But soon, I finally established myself in the idea that this was only a momentary obsession caused by my inflamed imagination. This was probably partly true, but now it seems to me that the line between real and imaginary, between reality and a dream, is not as strong as many people think. It is possible that it was my mood and sensitivity that revealed to me something that could never be revealed to a person passing over this bridge on the way to work. A man too driven by the pace of his crazy life to be able to notice what is around him. Probably, this whole story could have ended with this episode, but there must have been something in it that hooked me then. Some small grain that penetrated my mind and never let me go. A drop of poison, poisoning me from the inside, and now changing the form of me beyond recognition. I started having dreams. Almost the entire next week, I dreamed of the muddy water of Volkovka and this bridge. Occasionally, I heard some kind of rhythmic whisper. Every night, peering into the water, I expected to see something in it, something terrible. And at the very moment when it was about to appear, I woke up in a cold sweat. These dreams did not give me peace. I was drawn back to this bridge like a magnet, unable to bear it. The next Thursday, I made time in my busy schedule for this trip. By that time, I had managed to convince myself of the ridiculousness of what was happening, and I arrived at the place, albeit in the evening, but with a fair amount of irony. I expected to quickly look down, and, having made sure that there was nothing supernatural, and also having finally calmed my curiosity, to go home. The water was still cloudy and opaque. Mixed mud was still swirling in the stream, emerging from under the bridge. I looked a little more, and was already looking away, getting ready to leave, when suddenly, I heard something. Some rustling sounds coming from an abandoned industrial area near the bridge. I froze and began to listen. Since there were no cars around, it was very quiet, and the more I listened to this viscous silence, the more clearly the sounds became. Finally, I was able to understand what it was. A human whisper. It gradually became more distinct, and I realized that I had been hearing it for a long time. It was there when I got out of the car, but I only noticed it now. The whisper came from somewhere in front and below, as if from a river, but as its volume increased more and more, the direction to its source became less and less clear to me. It seemed to be coming from all sides, until, finally, at some point, it seemed to sound right in my head. Gradually, I made out more and more details. The same words were constantly repeated by several people, although I could still not even make out the language that they were speaking. They were pronounced rhythmically, constantly repeating in a circle, as if it were some kind of mantra or spell. The sounds of dull blows began to mix with the whispering, as if the whisperers began to hit something on the wooden floor in time with each word. The words were strange, they sounded like names. I remember these words with a shudder. The volume of the whispers grew, and the unknown people began to place more and more emphasis on each word, highlighting and pronouncing them with increasing pressure and confidence. This terrible action was about to reach some kind of apogee which it was striving for with increasing speed. Unable to do anything, I stood spellbound and listened. Now I'm scared to imagine what could have happened if headlights had not suddenly appeared behind me, and the rustling sound of studded tires rolling on the asphalt had not been heard. A truck driving by brought me out of my stupor, and the illusion dissipated. Having come to my senses, I looked at the time. A whole hour had passed. How? It got dark. In a state of extreme confusion, I got into the car and immediately drove away. Perhaps the reason for this was my nervous excitement, lack of sleep, and melancholic mood. This became less and less credible. A little scared and unsettled, I returned home. The dreams did not repeat themselves anymore, but I couldn't just leave it like that. The first thing I did was start looking for history and urban legends about these places, which turned out to be plenty. Looking ahead, I will say that it all began long before the appearance of a modern city here, and even long before large villages. Once upon a time in this place, there was an ancient pagan temple where the Karelians living here practiced very unpleasant cults. Once upon a time, the air here was charged with names that I not only dare not say out loud, but even name on these pages. But then, I didn't know so much. On the internet, I found information about frequent suicides in this area, as well as about the allegedly found ancient burial which was discovered during construction. But what interested me the most was the history of the cemetery. I have read many horror stories about how at night, in this area, you can meet the ghosts of people whose graves were razed to the ground to build roads, factories, and warehouses in their place. Their disturbed souls could not rest since they had nowhere to return to, and so they continued to walk from night to night and look for their final resting place. The bridge I was interested in, as it turned out, is called Grapovsky. Directly next to it, there used to be some kind of woodworking plant, an abandoned bridge across Volkovka equipped with rails which used to transport sawmill materials is visible from my favorite place near the railing. The plant is partially abandoned and partially demolished. A significant part of its territory was occupied by a recently built central substation for 330 kilovolts, from which underground tunnels with high voltage cables go to the south of the city to the 7th thermal power plant. Also nearby is a certain military research and production association for special materials and a skin and venereal disease clinic located in an ancient building of a former almshouse and surrounded on 3 sides by a cemetery. Wikimedia provided even more information. It took me to several water supply facilities located nearby, as well as to the vast territory of the Volkov waterworks. My curiosity is very insatiable, and soon I managed to find a man from the water utility who told me something else. He hinted that the management of water utility knew about something connected with this place, and was possibly involved in some of the events. Having made sure that I could be trusted, he told me that he had once been in a bomb shelter that had fallen into partial disrepair located in the south of the territory of the waterworks. He was not alone and could not carefully examine everything, but he noticed the entrance to a certain tunnel, not indicated on the diagram of the bomb shelter which he later found among the documents. Why did some tunnel so attract a simple worker, not burdened with any love for underground structures? He said that the passage looked very old, even antique. There was no concrete walls inside of it, and the vault was supported either by rotten wooden struts or by arches made of crumbled red brick. It was clearly built a long time ago. The lantern could not illuminate the end of the tunnel, but it gave the impression of the entrance to some grandiose, cyclopean structure. It was visible how at least 4 branches extended from it on the sides. Together, we began to search for information about the possible presence of an ancient network of tunnels in this place, and our search was crowned with success. During the construction of horizontal cable tunnels between the substation and the thermal power plant, the builders came across some old communications, so the report says, located under the cemetery and not indicated on their maps. What's surprising is that after this, any information and reports, all we could find was that the work was classified and the workers were transferred to other places. However, the 2 unfortunate people who were the first to open the old tunnels were forced to be sent to the IPH for treatment. What could they see there? We continued our research, and soon, Andre, as he called himself, sent me scans of documents that he managed to briefly steal from the administrative building of the pumping station. The documents mentioned a certain building, located on the territory of the station, and called Object 58. The documents hinted that there were Object 17 and 43, and many other numbers, in different cities and countries. He managed to get quite close to the building, and, judging by the sounds coming from there, he concluded that it was being used as some kind of temple. According to him, some religious rituals periodically take place in the building. I spent the next few days studying the documents, but still did not understand anything. They equally often contained both drawings of some pumps and communications, and drawings of occult symbols I had never seen before. The text describes some kind of equipment, which apparently was designed to draw some kind of magical energy from the water of Volkovka, the Obvodny Canal, and city wastewater. The water, in turn, was supposed to receive this energy from the cemetery, as well as from the people of the entire city. It was assumed that almost all the tap water circulating in the central regions of St. Petersburg sooner or later passes through the treatment facilities of the Volkovka station, and here they did something with this water. Something that it took energy from the people in whose apartments it flowed and who used it. The document said that all this energy should be used to summon some creatures, and in this way, the authors of the documents will be able to create what, according to them, their ancestors could not do. All of this reminded me of sheer nonsense, and I even began to think that Andre had forged documents just to prank me. However, he convinced me otherwise, and then I made up my mind. I remember well how we met that night, and he led me into the station territory through a hole in the fence. I will tell you only one thing: stay as far away from this place as possible. From the inside, it looks like a pumping station, only until you enter a series of rooms that are part of the system, the drawings of which Andre was able to find. In the first of them, I saw the same water from Volkovka with strange, swirling mud inside of it. The mud continually formed into images of the faces of dead people. There was pleading and horror on their faces, but I didn't know how to help them. These souls were destined to become fuel for some truly inhuman purposes. We wandered around the premises for a long time, trying to understand how it all worked, until we found the entrance to the basement. From there, we entered the tunnels. Judging by the scale and extent of these structures, they have entry points in many areas of the city, but the worst thing is their center, the place where they all ultimately laid, be it a longer or a shorter path. We were unlucky to get there in the middle of the ceremony. The huge underground hall was well lit, although there was still twilight in its corners. The far side of the hall was occupied by a huge underground lake, the water in which was absolutely black and somehow heavy in appearance, thick. Maybe it wasn't water at all. I can't be sure of anything now. In front of the lake, a group of emaciated and completely naked people sat on the floor. Their hands were tied. It's difficult to say how many people there were there, but probably around 10 people. Behind them, in an even line, stood a procession of people dressed in identical black robes with hoods. There were more of them, maybe about 15. Each of them held a torch in their left hand. Their faces were not visible, as they stood with their backs to us. We hid behind a column and began to watch. Soon, one of them came forward and began to recite something loudly. These words are forever etched into my memory. In the name of the mighty, we call on you, spirits of the earth. Please accept our humble offerings. The rest sang names in a chorus. The one who came forward continued. In the name of the one who wears the yellow mask, we appeal to you, spirits of the earth. Please accept our humble offerings. The choir and the man continued to alternate in the same order, them saying names, and him spouting some other stuff. In the name of the one who is the key in the gate, we appeal to you, spirits of the earth. Please accept our humble offerings. While the others were singing their lines and names, the leader of the ceremony turned around and extended his hand to one of the choir, who turned out to be a young girl. She came up and took the leader's hand. Let the waters part and let the force find its true form. With a shudder and unable to move so as not to be discovered, we watched as the black abyss of water suddenly began to boil. The leader of the ceremony brought the girl to the very edge of the water of this ungodly lake. She spread her arms to the side, and the robes fell from her shoulders, revealing a completely naked body. Small gray particles, like sand, escaped from the disgusting abyss and soared upward, forming under the ceiling into a terrifying parody of any earthly creature. The next moment, it attacked the girl and swallowed her up in itself. A new speaker suddenly took the place of the previous speaker from somewhere outside our field of vision. He was dressed in a rich robe, decorated with gold and silver ornaments and embroidery. The entire hem of this robe was covered with some kind of signs. He extended his hands to the creatures and said, "I listen to the ancients. I call the true names. Come, spirits of the earth, and accept the gift of the will of these mortals." And then the worst thing began. Although we were watching on the sly, and no one saw us, together with the unfortunate people tied up and left near the shore of the underground lake, we felt that we had lost all ability to control our bodies. Suddenly, our lips began to move by themselves, and I heard my own voice, echoed by the voices of all those gathered, both prisoners and heroes of the occasion. "I give you power over myself, my lord, from now and forever." I remember very vaguely what happened next. The tied people were untied, and they, like Andre, slowly, as if in a dream, walked towards the seething waters of the underground lake. I, having somehow managed to free myself from the tenacious clutches of the madness that had gripped me, ran away. I remember that I fell, then got up and ran again. I ran and I ran. Then I turned to the right, then another left, and then right again. It seemed like the path went on forever, but after some time, I saw a saving light up ahead. Since then, no matter how hard I try to forget this terrible text that was uttered then by my lips against my will, it comes to me again and again every night. And even worse, sometimes I myself don't notice how I whisper these words under my breath, only catching myself in the middle of the sentence with fear. It also happened that I suddenly woke up, half sitting on my bed. I woke up from reciting them out loud. Something has happened to me, and I'm afraid I can't do anything anymore. I have very strange dreams. Sometimes I take part in some rituals and ceremonies there, and sometimes I realize that I myself am in some kind of other world. I look up, and I don't even recognize the stars. Nevertheless, despite the enormous mental pressure, I managed to live these few years without showing it, and maintaining the connections that I had. But, about a month ago, my situation worsened. I was fired from work due to constant absenteeism. I have always been a very disciplined person, but I could not help the fact that when I look at the calendar when I wake up, it turns out that I have slept for several days. Someone always turns off my alarm clocks, and I'm afraid that I am doing it myself. The worst part is that I now constantly find scary letters written in my own handwriting in my trash can, but I swear I did not throw them there, and especially I did not write such a thing. I thought I could handle it. I drank a lot of coffee and energy drinks to stay awake, got amphetamines and antipsychotics for a friend, but after what happened yesterday, I realized that it was useless to fight, and that I must write about everything while I am still able to do so. Yesterday, I went to sleep at home, in my bed, but I woke up, dressed in a cassock, painted with nightmarish ornaments, in the middle of these terrible tunnels. I ran as fast as I could, and I didn't even understand whether I was running from the tunnels or from myself. I was lucky to get out again, but what will happen next time if I end up sleepwalking there again, or wake up somewhere else? I will share my story for the first time, here and now. When I was 14, I had the most traumatic experience of my life. I will never forget it. I was living in a suburb of Minneapolis at the time. It was an extremely hot summer day in August. I was running around with friends in the neighborhood playing tag when I noticed a huge grasshopper or locust clinging to the side of my house. I was an odd teen. I used to capture insects and do experiments on them, so you can understand how excited I was to see such a big insect within my grasp. I captured the thing and remember thinking it strange how it didn't struggle in my hands. I grabbed my notepad to take some notes and a bunch of household cleaners we had stored in the cupboard below the sink. I added a bit of bleach or something and things started going crazy. Note, I added several more chemicals over the next 10 minutes or so until the creature was dead, at which point I threw it in the toilet, flushed, and watched it swirl down the drain until it disappeared. After I had put the chemicals back into place, I went into my bedroom to place the notepad back in the drawer of my nightstand. The second I entered the room, I saw that damn thing I had just tortured and flushed down the toilet, chilling on my little nightstand. I did a double take. Sure enough, it was still there. I approached slowly to examine the insect. When I grabbed the thing between my index finger and thumb, the weirdest thing happened. Imagine there is a piece of fabric in the palm of your left hand. It represents the fabric of space and time. Now take your right hand and pinch a piece of the fabric between said fingers and then invert it or pull it inside out so that the bottom of the fabric is now on top. When I grabbed that thing, it was as if all of reality had flipped inside out. I was part of that fabric. The fact that I was an observer only created the illusion that I was separate or outside of what I was perceiving around me. Instantly, I was on my back and paralyzed. Standing over me, one to my left and one to my right, were two very white and taller aliens. Keep in mind, at that point in my life, I had never seen the classic, stereotypical image of an alien. It wasn't until I was 19 when I saw the cover of a book titled Communion that I realized that what had tormented me that day were aliens. They had the same big head and huge black eyes as the creature on the cover of that book, except they were very tall and very white, and not the little grey aliens most people describe under hypnosis. Anyway, the two ETs or demons or whatever they have placed the palm of their hands over my ribcage, and what I experienced at that moment I can only describe as raw terror. It was absolute terror, electric terror. I couldn't breathe or move or even blink. I could not tell you how long it lasted or what even happened after. I have no recollection of any of it ending. I didn't come into my bedroom or anywhere for that matter. That was it. What I did later that day, or who I talked with about the experience, is completely unknown to me. All I know is that from that moment on, I have been a different person. It was the defining moment of my life. A year or so ago, I got a little buzzed and called my dad to talk. I asked him something I had wanted to ask him for years, but never dared to do so because I didn't really want to know. I asked him if he or mom ever noticed anything strange about me when I was a child, and if I had said anything about what I was going through, as I had always suffered from what I can only describe as being severe night terrors. I was afraid to go to bed. In fact, it had a severe impact on my youth. What my dad said actually caused me to start hyperventilating, and I had to end the phone call immediately. He reluctantly said that, yes, they had noticed something very strange and had even had me exorcised, even though neither my mom nor my dad are religious at all. I was also the subject of extensive neuropsyche testing at the University of Minnesota. In hindsight, it all made sense. I remember the doctors and scientists. They even came to visit me at my elementary school on a daily and then a weekly basis. My dad simply said that he would describe what he was witnessing as being almost alien. That was the word that brought on my panic during the phone call. I had to hang up. What makes this so compelling to me is the fact that I had never been into science fiction, aliens, or mythology. In fact, I thought it was all downright stupid. I became a hardcore, materialist reductionist scientist later in life. I rejected everything I had had personal experience with for many years. It was as if I was in denial. I was in denial. I am just now trying to reconcile this experience and others of a more supernatural nature. The experience I described here was the first and last experience I had involving ETs, as far as I know. I am now 52 years old. I have severe PTSD and have undergone multiple series of electroconvulsive therapy. I have been hospitalized numerous times over the years for major depression and PTSD. I cannot for the life of me understand why I have PTSD, but I am considering the possibility that there is more going on than I am conscious of. There is something anomalous about me, a quality or ability, if you will, that I have never shared, nor will I ever share. I know better than to share such things with psychiatrists or therapists. The eyes cannot see what the mind does not know.